anyway, the but we need to move forward, and I think one of the things you wanted to talk about with me was how our church should move forward, and
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
should we
we're
say?
gonna get to that one. The other
Yeah.
question I had that many people are interested in knowing is there's people in World Orthodox. This is the probably the most controversial question is how we think and we talked about this yesterday a bit, is the whole a lot of people are like, well, the grace question, especially like we mentioned with the Moscow Patriarchate. Um, how do we answer that? Like, how do we?
Well, well,
That's always the question. Oh, do you think we have grace?
yeah, the whole grace, no grace thing. Well, put that in perspective. The first shot in that war was not fired by us. It was fired by the State Church of Greece in
Yeah,
1933. That said the old counter church has no grace.
yep.
They
And
started
the true
it.
Matthewites. Yep.
They started it. Okay. And also, and now even though the older in our Greek world in America, the older bishops and clergy were much more friendly to us. They didn't want to join us. They thought we were crazy or whatever, well, actually, some of them actually admired us. Actually, here in Denver, we had an Athonite hieromonk who was our rector at St. Spiridon's for many years in Denver, Father Ephraim, and new
Hmm.
counter priests would come to him for spiritual counsel. Just as on Mount Athos, many of the commemorating monks go to our zealot fathers for counsel because they realize these people are really spiritual people. Right? Anyway, but so the older generation of the Greek clergy here in America were more open and friendly and normal, like normal people. But the younger clergy now are getting very aggressive and ugly about
Yeah,
us.
yeah,
And I think it's their conscience bothers them. Also, they're ignorant. They're very rigid. They're company men, right? The old generation are more like real people. They're just
yeah,
you know, Greeks, just regular
yeah,
people. And the new generation are more company men, like you know, I'm you know, I'm formed at Holy Cross and I have this diploma and I'm part of
hmm,
this great organization and you're unofficial and you're uncanonical and you're nothing and most of them they're very ill informed and
yeah,
it's very sad. So we've had situations here in Detroit uh, where Greek new counter clergy told people, and I'll go ahead and tell this story I told you yesterday. For example, this is just one example. This is one of many anecdotal examples. One of many anecdotal examples. Or we had a family, a multi-generational old counter family in our parish in St. Spiridon's in Detroit. And one of the younger ladies, was not very churchly. She wasn't coming to church very much, and she was kind of And she had an Italian-American boyfriend who was Roman Catholic, of course. And she never tried to convert him. She assumed he wouldn't convert to Orthodoxy, and she didn't even try. And she knew we wouldn't marry them unless he converted. So she went to the New Calendar. She went to the New Calendar Church, and they signed up to do the wedding. You know, pay the $2,000 or whatever, you know, whatever they ask, and sign up. Got put on the calendar for a wedding. Then 2 weeks before the wedding, the secretary called and said, "Father so and so wants to see you." So now, the other development is that her uncle, who was a very devoted parishioner of Saint Spiridon, agreed to be the kumbara at the wedding. Which he shouldn't have done, of course, but it's human nature. I mean, it's family and all that. So he agreed to be the kumbara at the wedding, and he was called in too. So the priest sat there. He's a very well-known, very wealthy, powerful Eucalder priest in the Detroit community. And he sat across them and he said, you, you to the girl, you have to be chrismated because you're not really Orthodox. Your baptism was not valid. And we're going to chrismate you to make you an Orthodox Christian. To this girl who was baptized at St. Spiridon's.
Yeah.
Then he said to the kumbara, the priest, you must renounce the old calendar and be chrismated and no longer. And the irony was, this same priest used to come to our Hiddeties Me services on Friday night to hear good chanting, to go to the real thing. Yeah. But he'd flipped. I guess they gotten orders, to go harder or stronger or whatever. And so he said, you're also without grace. Your sacraments are invalid. We have to chrismate you, and you have to promise to join the new calendar. So my parishioner said, well, I'm not going to join you. And the girl went, and she said, what about my fiance? What about fiance? He's Roman Catholic. And the priest said, no, he's fine. His baptism's valid. So, and this is just one of many anecdotal, much anecdotal evidence. So it's very clear we don't need to say they're the same religion as the Pope, and we're a different religion. They're saying it. They're saying that they're whatever grace they have is the grace the Pope has. So my question to the new calendar says, well, what grace is there in the Pope? Well, that's the grace you have, because that's what your bishops teach.
Yeah.
Whatever grace is there. Another thing I tell people is don't think first about the grace question. That's very emotional. Yes. It's a very emotional question. Very emotional. And it's not the way to lead off. You don't lead off as saying you're without grace.
Yeah.
That's why even if the Matthew White position is logical and demonstrable, it's a terrible pastoral approach. Because if you're saying I'm not Orthodox, you're saying I'm not Greek. You're saying I have no identity at all. For a Greek or a Serb or a Russian, his orthodoxy is integral to being like who I am. You're saying I don't exist. You're saying I'm nothing, right? If you say I'm not an
Mhm.
orthodox. And so you don't start saying, wait a second, the Holy Father has given us criteria for discerning where is the church. Where is the church? How do you discern where the true bishops are, where the faith is being taught, where the true apostolic succession exists, where the true spiritual life is, where the confession of faith is? Who has the confession of faith? That's the starting point. They can't be the church unless they have the confession of faith. Let's start with that. With the criteria for being the church, you have to start where the church is. The church is the pan mysterion. She is the treasury of all graces. Right? If you're
Mhm.
in the church, you're safe. You're in the ark of salvation. Right? If you're outside the church, you can make arguments for having grace, but it's totally incoherent. It's disconnected. There's no point to it. And even St. Augustine's and before him, Pope Stephen's early arguments for the heretics having grace, they were thinking about heretics who were recently heretics who were ordained as Orthodox. They were talking about
Mhm.
they've got bishops who were ordained by the Catholic, that is the Orthodox Church, who later became heretics. They weren't talking about people who, after 1,000 years,
Yeah.
are have been heretics, right? That's not what they were talking about. So their whole all their arguments, all these convoluted arguments about how the heretical hierarchy can still have grace are not only incorrect, because the church or the phronime of the Orthodox Church really accepts Saint Cyprian of Carthage's position, right,
Mhm.
about that. But even if you wanted to examine and give credence to St. Augustine's arguments or Pope Stephen's arguments, they don't apply today. It's totally different circumstances, right? They weren't talking, and they were, and not only about the Catholics and the Protestants, they've been separated from Orthodoxy for so long. They're so far gone. It's absurd to talk about it as if we were back in the 4th century or the 3rd century.
Yeah.
And or in the 12th century with the papists, right? For example, until the 15th century, or even later in some places, the papists still baptized by immersion. You go
Mhm.
see late medieval baptismal fonts that are fonts. I mean, the babies were put all the way in the font. Okay, and
Mhm.
I'm so adults that they baptized were still baptizing adults by that point. So things have changed so much it's absurd to talk about them. And then insofar as the world Orthodox are concerned, we're talking about generational apostasy. We're talking going back to 1924 or with the Surgeons back to 1927. So we're talking about generations of men who are brought up in a system to deny the confession of the faith, that you couldn't be advanced unless you were an ecumenist. You couldn't be advanced unless you were a surgeonist, or unless you were actually an atheist in Russia, right?
Mhm.
Um, so we're not talking about men who mistakenly fell into some theological error, but they're still good, good, a good despota, a good vladika, and he doesn't know any better. And we're talking about generations. We're talking generations of institutional apostasy at this point. We're talking about a century institutional,
Yeah.
not just heresy, it's apostasy. And also when people say that, well, this error, ecumenism is a new error not condemned yet by a conciliar decision or a pan-orthodox decision. Say, but the nature of ecumenism is that you are united to all the errors that are already condemned.
Mm-hmm.
Ecumenism inherently, the very logic of ecumenism, it unites you mentally, spiritually, unites you to all these previously condemned errors. Because the very basis of ecumenism is tolerance or of error and theological indifferentism. So the very
Mm-hmm.
nature of ecumenism doesn't mean to be condemned because it is the sum of all heresies.
It's an
All heresies.
amalgamation of all of them.
It's the summation of all the heresies, and they're all condemned. They're all just read the Synodicon of Orthodoxy. The
Mm-hmm.
ecumenism unites you to all those errors, right?
Yeah.
So you're already condemned. You're self-condemned by being an ecumenist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And also with ecumenism, we're not only talking about pan-Christian unity, right? Like the original 1912 Faith and Order Commission or the 1948 Charter. We're talking about pan-religious syncretism. For example, Patriarch Kirill, for example, people have to realize the Moscow Patriarchate doesn't have their their Western front in the WCC. They have their Eastern front in the World Congress of Religions that for the past couple of years have met in Astana in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
And the MP is instrumental. I don't know, the MP may be the organizers of it, but they're certainly instrumental in it. And Patriarch Kirill certainly is a big shot there. And that's pan-religious. That's Buddhists, Muslims, Jews. Because remember, in the new ideology of the Russian Federation is that there are four traditional religions: Orthodox Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and Buddhism. Those are the four traditional religions of the Russian nation, or at least
Mm-hmm.
the Russian Empire. Not the nation are
Yeah.
the Orthodox, but the empire, there are four. They're traditional religions. They're all on equal footing. If you watch the interview that Tucker Carlson did with Putin, Putin more or less restates this position that he's indifferent to these theological positions. And of course, the Moscow Patriarchate carries out is in one with the ideology of the RF government, right? So Patriarch Kirill is full steam ahead with pan-religious syncretism, much
Mm-hmm.
less intramural Christian ecumenism. Right? So, and of course, in the World Council of Churches, they've also degenerated into pan-religious syncretism with pagan rituals, lesbian bishops, the whole nine yards. Um, so insofar as one way to approach when a world Orthodox says are you saying we don't have grace? One way to come back to them, do a little jujitsu, okay? Make them answer the
Mm-hmm.
question. Say, now, here are the criteria for the churches. Is there the true confession of faith? Here, your bishop and your patriarch have done X, Y, and Z. Are they really still bishops under the statement of under the formula of Canon 15 of the first and second? Aren't they regarded as pseudo bishops? Right, the
Mm-hmm.
famous Canon 51st. They're pseudo bishops, right? And we're justified in walling off, and they're pseudo bishops. So you tell me, do they have grace? Why don't you tell me? You're sure. You're absolutely sure. Maybe you're asking me this question because you're not so sure.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a little insecure. You're upset with me. I'm secure, but you're upset with me because you're insecure. Or you're just personally offended, like it's an insult. Like I'm just this guy. I'm team A and you're team B, and I'm saying team A is better than team B, and you're personally offended
Yeah.
by that. That's just human passion, right?
That
It's
brings
not
the
a
question, why does it matter? Because, we have like a lot of people in these certain resist within communities that are saying, it doesn't matter what the bishop does. I have a traditional priest or I have a traditional elder. Why
well,
does it
if that
matter that
was
their bishops are doing it?
well, if the Constitution of the Church were Presbyterian, that
Hmm.
could be a valid argument. But the Constitution of the Church is Episcopal. So the presbyter is just an extension of the bishop. When you open that antimension, that priest opens that antimension and sees that name, Bartholomew of Constantinople, Kirill of Moscow, or Jacobus of America. Well, I'm dating myself.
Apiloforos.
Epiphorus of America. Your faith, if you're saying your faith is the same as that man. When the deacon says his name, he's saying that's our faith. The deacon's leading the people in prayer. He's saying, our Lord, our most, his, whatever his beatitude, whatever the title is, His Holiness of Constantinople. They're proclaiming publicly, we're in the church because we know we're in the church because our faith is the same as the faith of this man who's a successor of the holy apostles. That's
Hmm.
Orthodox Ecclesiology 101. So to say, well, we have a traditional priest, or are you just Presbyterians? I mean, what
Hmm.
Yeah, I thought you converted to Orthodoxy, or you're so proud of being Orthodox because you know it's the Apostolic Church. Well, the Apostolic succession means the bishops.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you have to have an Orthodox bishop, and the bishop has to be in an Orthodox synod because even if he's privately Orthodox, if he collaborates with the public apostasy of his synod and patriarch, he's liable.
Hmm.
He's liable for that apostasy. He's a collaborator.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people are. That was in my footnote in the book that I wrote, The History of Resistance. That's what I coined that. Orthodox Presbyterianism, because that's a lot of what they're advocating.
Well, that's what it is. That's what it is. And
Leadership by
then
the presbyters.
they say a parish, or they say my elder. Well, then there's this disease of elderism. Okay, now
Yeah.
it is true in the church we have institutional authority and we have charismatic authority, or the prophetic authority. That's always been true in the church. It's not like, and one of the errors of Catholicism is they mash the two together. Right. There's no uh, distinct charismatic authority. That it's all this pyramid of power of the of the institutional hierarchy. Well, we know that in Orthodox, one of the many proofs or evidences of the Orthodox Church's divine origin is that to this very day we have this we have clairvoyant elders. We have the people as Kontsevich beautifully states in his study, The Acquisition of the Holy Spirit in Ancient Russia, that the what we call Starchestvo, or it is the prophecies. The gift of prophecy is spoken in the Old and New Testaments, right? So this exists also in the church, right? But the prophets, a true prophet will never deny orthodoxy. He could have gifts. He could be a wonder worker. But if he's a true elder, he will not deny orthodoxy. And this is one thing to understand, that you can have an elder who's denying orthodoxy, but still somehow retain some of these charismatic gifts for whatever reason, the providence of God. He can have raised the dead, you know. But St. Paul says if an angel from heaven should preach a different gospel, you shouldn't believe him. Well, much less Father Paisios or Father Ephraim. They're not, St. Paul says an angel from heaven should preach a different gospel. Okay. So this is this is a big plani, a prelest, a big delusion that people are in, the Ephraim followers, the Paisios worshippers. I'm not judging the eternal destiny of Father Ephraim or Father Paisius. May God give them paradise. May God forgive whatever mistakes they made. I'm, I'm sure they had many personal gifts and qualities that are far above mine. But they compromised the faith. And Ephraim was really the hit man for the ecumenical patriarchate that prevented many pious people from joining the old counters. Until Ephraim came to this country, people who left the archdiocese would join us. But then Ephraim comes, has all this money to build beautiful monasteries, say, hey, we can have it all. We can have our cake and eat it too. We can confess the faith and enjoy the big buildings and the aura of elders from Athos and all this razzle dazzle. See? And so Ephraim he has a lot to answer for. Forgive me, but the Ephraimites have a lot to answer for.
It's interesting. He was in the GOC, and we have that on an audio recording to where he says that he was in the office of Archbishop Exentios for work. Well, why would he be in the office of Archbishop Exentius for work if you addressing him as his bishop?
Also, Metropolitan Demetrius did a very good video where he points out that all the Ephraimite and Joseph the Hezekiah's line of Starchesville all goes back to Zealot fathers.
Mm-hmm.
Also
Yeah.
have the Zealot fathers, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, getting back to this elderism, yes, there is a charismatic gift in the church. We need that, but we need true prophets. If they were true prophets, they'd be calling out the bishops who are compromised. They'd be calling them out. A true
Mm-hmm.
prophet calls out the powerful people who are betraying the faith, right? But if you don't do that, if you just support them, you're a court prophet, like in the Old Testament. All the court prophets who were wined and dined by the monarchy, right, and compromised. And the true prophets were very few: Isaiah, Jeremiah. And how did they meet their end? They were killed. They were persecuted. They were martyred. And
Mm-hmm.
while the court prophets were going on, giving prophecies, oh, the king is great, Israel is great, things are wonderful, and so you might say that God forgive me, but in a manner of speaking, Father Paisius, Father Porphyrius, Father Ephraim, and so forth are court prophets, right? They had the mantle of the prophet, and I'm sure they helped many people on a personal level. I'm not denying that. I'm sure there are many people who are be very hurt if they heard any criticism. I know there are people they flip out if you criticize these people, because it's very emotional for them, very personal for them, and I understand that. That's a human weakness, right? And I ask forgiveness if I'm offending anyone's emotions, right? Anyone's sentiments. But basically they function as court prophets who would use the mantle of the prophet to uphold a compromised and indeed heretical apostatical institutional authority. And this is a very profound perversion, very profound, and it's very subtle. Right? You need discernment not to you need a lot of discernment not to fall into this. And that's why I understand where they're coming from. I understand their sentiments and their emotions, but they just have to admit they're wrong.
Yeah.
They're just wrong.
That leads
They're just
me
wrong.
to the next question, because in your writings and talk, you've spoken about the spiritual deception of modern ecumenism. How is that ecumenical mentality manifested within like world orthodoxy and the people that you see coming into orthodoxy today? It's like
Well,
it's like an infection.
yeah, it's a fog. It's a miasma. That's a great word. It's a great word, miasma. It must be from Greek, right? Miasma. Everything's from Greek, right?
Everything's from Greek.
Everything's from Greek. So there's a miasma means like swamp gas. you know.
Mhm.
There's a swamp gas filling the atmosphere.
I know.
And
I'm here in DC. It's everywhere.
yeah, well, DC, don't get me on DC. That's another DC's a whole another lecture. But so there's this atmosphere of deception and might say spiritual brain fog. And one aspect of this is that for the past 100 years, people in power have perfected the technological means of mass mind control. We know that very well, right? In the secular world. And in powerful institutions like the Moscow Patriarchate, who are very skilled, um, because remember, the Moscow Patriarchate's just the ecclesiastical wing of the KGB, right? The KGB are masters at at mass brainwashing and deception, manipulation of data, and so forth. And then the other World Orthodox are kind of catching up. I think they're not the Moscow Patriot. They're the pros. The MP are the pros. They're the best.
They really
But
are. Yeah.
they really are. They're just it's amazing. But the others are catching up, right? And they can present a facade of the externals of Orthodox. And this is again getting back to Andreev's essay, 1948. This is really the spirit of Antichrist. What? Because remember, Antichrist, Antichristos doesn't mean against Christ. It means in the place of Christ.
Hmm.
Right? We English speakers get confused because our definition of anti is from Latin, which means against. But
Hmm.
Antichristos is Greek, and it means in the place of Christ. So the deception, the devil knows he has all the irreligious people, the atheists, the whoremongers, the pagans, whatever. He knows that the target of Antichrist is the pious Orthodox Christians.
Yeah.
Because they're the only opposition. That's why the target of the KGB was always Russia's brother. The KGB didn't have to attack the Metropolia or the
Hmm.
Evlogians. They had them. They had to
Yeah.
attack the Russian Church abroad. It was the only real enemy. Well, for the devil, the only real enemy are the Orthodox Christians. So the Antichristos and the spirit of Antichristos is specifically designed to entrap the pious. Pious people are not trapped by secularism. Pious people are not trapped by overt sin or grossness. They're trapped by a false piety. So
Hmm.
you see you see a video of a beautiful service in Russia. You see a beautiful choir conference in Bucharest where all these Romanian boys are chanting their hearts out in Byzantine chant. Say, oh, this must be the true church. I mean, how could this not be the true church? See, that's the problem. And it's and modern people, including not only the American converts, everybody now, everybody in the sense is Americanized now, right? In the bad sense. And there's a
Hmm.
good sense of American. But that's another lecture. The good things about America. and the bad things. But in a sense, everybody's Americanized, modernized, postmodernized, and people are very, very prone to simply accept appearances. I mean, the whole internet generation, where they're living virtual, they have virtual girl. I'll talk to young people now. They'll come to confession and say, "Well, I was talking to my girlfriend, and your girlfriend, who is she? I never met her. Oh, she lives in Oslo. You, well, you mean she's a kid you talk to, and no, she's my girlfriend. We have a relationship. You see, so the new well, it sounds ridiculous, but it's to them it's
Yeah.
real. Okay, so people are increasingly. I mean, that's an extreme example, but people are increasingly just simply accept virtual reality for reality, right? So
Mhm.
it's a big problem. It's so now it's so hardwired into people now, and also even before the era of mass brainwashing, just the human tendency to mistake um, sentiment as a conclusive proof of a dogmatic truth or a metaphysical truth. Sentiment is important. Sentiment is the driving force in the heart, in the chest, that drives you to action and to warmth. But the action and warmth have to be directed by the logos, by truth. Truth comes first, right? On the base of truth, you build correct sentiment,
Mhm.
correct use of sentiment. But what you do is if you jump to, and related to this, related also to the misuse of sentiment is the misuse of beauty. You know, there are people, there are world Orthodox, there are converts to world Orthodoxy who were converted by Dostoevsky, saying, beauty will save the world.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, Dostoevsky is not an Orthodox theologian by any means. Um, Although he was a pious Orthodox and a genuine Orthodox, but a repentant Orthodox, but not a theologian. Secondly, Dostoevsky never claimed he said that. Dostoevsky never believed that.
Mhm.
That line is from The Idiot, where someone comes up to Prince Mishkin at a party. I think they're celebrating his engagement to Aglaya Ivanovna in the Idiot, and someone says, Prince, is it true that you once said beauty will save the world? And even Mishkin himself, it isn't, is he, remember, Mishkin is not a saint. Mishkin is a mentally ill, um, innocent, that is Dostoevsky's portrayal of what would a saint be if we didn't have Christ?
Mhm.
What's a humanistic saint? So even Prince Mishkin supposedly taught this. That's all. That's all. That whole the beauty will save the world. It's a it's a sound bite. It's a meme. It's not even a. It's certainly not any kind of a metaphysical truth, much less a
Mhm.
dogmatic revealed truth. And so people use this and they distort this. So look, this is so beautiful. The icons are so beautiful. The chant is so beautiful. That this must be the church, right? And that's not, that's disordered. You start with truth or dogmatic truth or the confession of faith, then you move to the themos, to virtuous action, and then you move finally to eros, the divine beauty, right, as an ultimate prize or of your struggle in faith and in proxies, right? So that's a very distorted idea. So that's popular with the more chic, like cool American converts. You know, beauty will save the world. They think they've said something very profound, whereas they've just they've they're taken something out of context from a conversation with a mentally ill person in a 19th century novel. um so yeah, there's a lot of deception going on. It's the spirit of it is the spirit of Antichrist. It is the spirit of Antichrist. It is a fog in the mind. It's a capturing the heart and capturing sentiment to go in the wrong direction based on a foundation of sand. And unfortunately, or not, I shouldn't say that unfortunately, because all of God's wisdom is perfect. I should not say unfortunately, that's wrong. But in the providence of God, by his sovereign will and his decision, he'll let you go on being deceived as long as you want to be. God will allow heretics to paint beautiful icons and have card conferences. And he will allow there to be true Orthodox priests who have mismatched vestments and have a chanter who has laryngitis and doesn't even know how to sing. Because he's testing our minds and hearts. He's testing our determination to love him above all, to confess him above all. We don't need a council to condemn ecumenism. Ecumenism is condemned by the first commandment. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no false gods before me. Do we need a council for that?
According to
Do we need a
some.
council for that?
Yeah.
Oh, we approve of the law of Moses. We approve of the first you shall love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul and all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. We need a council for that? You guys waiting for that communal council for that?
Yeah.
You're not indignant. You're not weeping every day that our Christ is insulted by these men who are lighting menorahs and praying with Buddhists. You're not indignant. You don't, it doesn't grieve you. You're not weeping when Bartholomew says Muhammad's a prophet. That doesn't disturb you. That our Christ who suffered for us and poured out his blood for us is being so insulted, spit upon, blasphemed by these men. That doesn't disturb you. It's just an academic question. Well, they haven't been condemned by a council yet. And they think they've said something so profound. It's stupid.
Yeah.
They're revealing their complete. It's not an intellectual stupidity so much as a complete spiritual blindness to this. It's so big. It's like hidden in plain sight. This apostasy is so big. It's so huge. It's so ubiquitous, so global. They can't even, you can't even wrap your head around it. It's so horrible. And but they're playing all these like Talmudic games with the canons to justify being in with this jurisdiction. Where how little does your mind, how little can the human mind get? That's after a while it's just
Yeah.
it's there, but I shouldn't be. With you, I can be impatient about this. With them, you cannot be impatient. You have to be. We have to be control ourselves and be very patient. Realize, well, I was there too.
Mm-hmm.
I was there too, and
I
I could
was.
think like that too. I was. That's where I was. I was there too. I was in the Antiochians. I almost justified staying with Rokor and going towards Moscow. We're no better than they are,
Mm-hmm.
right? There, but for the grace of God go I. So it's the capacity of the human mind for being deceived, which is unfathomable. It's not infinite because only God is infinite, but it is, from our point of view, the capacity of our minds to be deceived is unfathomable.
It it seems that the world Orthodox, they take this question of ecumenism and they, like you said, it's like a Talmudic, it's a legal thing where it's like, oh yeah, it hasn't been condemned yet, therefore we can keep doing it. Instead of it's a instead of seeing it as in the spiritual sense where
Well, there's no
that
there.
that it's an infection that will seep into
You
the
know,
mind and
well, it's like, well, it's fair. It's I use this. An illustration could be the whole gay movement, right?
Mhm.
The gay movement finally they destroyed the yuck factor.
Yeah, yeah,
Because when people were healthy, you'd hear about sodomy, just go yuck, right?
yeah,
You didn't need an argument. You didn't need theology. You didn't need psychology. You just yuck. That's disgusting. That's gross. You know. And so what they've done, and that's parallel. What they've done, they've destroyed the yuck factor. So back in the
Mhm.
'60s, when Athenagoras paid with the Pope, that was a big deal. It was
Yeah,
shocking. And for several years, things like that only happened once a year or now and then, but now it's all the time. And they've
yeah,
destroyed the yuck factor. Then it was yuck. That's horrible. Oh man, no. How could he do that? Even people who stayed with him say, "How could he do that? That's unbelievable. Uh, I'm very upset. I'm crying over this. I'm pained over this. This is
Mhm.
horrible." And what they've done, they've numbed people up. They've anesthetized, and they don't have the yuck factor anymore.
Yeah.
But it's not just. I mean, that sounds comic. I mean, I don't mean to be
It's true though.
pathetic and just say, but it's true. It's but I want to get back to the point that we should be offended for Jesus' sake.
Mhm.
Do you love Jesus? Here he is. He's on the cross, dying for you. And you're okay with a bishop who says there are many ways to paradise. And here he is, he poured out his precious blood for you. And he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And this patriarch is saying, oh, hey, it's cool, man. You want to be I'll bless you for Ramadan. Your fasting is blessed by God. And that's not an insult to our Christ. You're not wounded. You're not personally, it doesn't cause you grief day and night to think that your supposed patriarch is saying such things. You know, even if you don't relieve him right away, aren't you pained? Aren't you worried? It doesn't this cause anxiety? Doesn't it cause grief? That we should love Christ and be weeping that he's being insulted like this. It's like the new calendar. People want to go through all these gymnastics. Is it a heresy? Blah, blah, blah. I say, I don't know if it's a heresy, but it's a sin. I don't want anything to do with it's an assault on the church. You can call it a heresy, call it what you want. It's bad. It's yuck. Like then the yuck factor. You can make up all your casuistic arguments you want, you know. I guess you went to the Jesuits taught you to make all these whatever. Somebody taught you to make all these Talmudic arguments. But you know, if you had the heart of an Orthodox Christian, you'd say, "That's disgusting. I don't want the new calendar. Of course, I want the church's calendar." And I
Well,
shouldn't have to. It's a no-brainer.
as LP Laforo says, the only reason you think like that is because you have boulders of prejudice that you can't see that all roads lead to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, you know,
You're the
it's
wrong
but
one.
you know the word prejudice has a bad rap. You know, Edmund Burke in his work on the French Revolutions says obviously prejudices are what holds societies together. What is a prejudice is a prejudgment. If we had to rejudge everything all the time, you couldn't have a coherent society. You couldn't have a family, right? There are correct prejudices and there are incorrect prejudices. But the church's prejudices are prejudgment. No, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have a prejudgment, a prejudice that the old calendar is the right calendar. Why reinvent the wheel? Why say, well, that's a prejudice. It's a prejudice, but it's a correct prejudice, a correct prejudgment. It's an assumption we all have. And you destroyed the yuck factor by your brainwashing and your intimidation and your persecution and your false teachings in the seminaries. So now the yuck factor is gone, but our fathers knew in 1924, yuck. This is obviously evil. It's obviously bad. It stinks from a mile away. You've destroyed people's normal instincts. It's not just here, it's here.